All right, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight for the middle school reconfiguration meeting. I'd like to provide a little bit of an update from some of our work last spring to bring everyone up to speed with regard to the middle school realignment that's going to take place next fall in the Chelmsford schools. This is for the start of the 23-24 school year, which is less than a year away. We actually have, and just to give you a couple of points of information, we are going to start the presentation by reviewing the thought process that went into the decision to actually do this realignment. We have close to 500 individuals who've actually registered to listen tonight. And as we can see, we're up to close to probably 300 or so that are joining live to watch us tonight. We are going to videotape, obviously record this, and we're going to post it to the website tomorrow as well for anyone else who would like to see it. But when we were looking through the numbers of people who registered, we did notice that a significant portion of the people who registered did not register for either of the spring sessions last year, either in person or online. And we had received some very good feedback last year about the review that we had done to kind of talk about why we were contemplating this particular middle school realignment, reconfiguration, what was some of the history that went into that. So this may be a little bit repetitive in the beginning for people who did participate last year, but I do think it sets good groundwork for the decision that was made and how we're going to be moving forward. And then towards the end of the session, we are going to talk a little bit about the work that's been taking place in the school system to get us to this point, how we're going to be rolling out this realignment a little bit over the winter and spring, and when some decisions are going to be made and communicated with parents, students, and faculty. So we will touch on that a little bit at the end. Again, because of this particular format with so many people watching, it really doesn't lend itself to a question and answer period. So at the end of this session tonight, we are going to share a Google form that individuals can go online, and actually, if you have any specific questions, when we get to the end of this, you can ask them. If you have any areas of concern that you'd like us to take into consideration and keep in mind as we're doing this reconfiguration work over the next 6 months or so, you can share that with us. And as we'll mention at the end, we'll actually go through that. We'll prepare a frequently asked question document. We'll post that to the newsletters, we'll post that to the website, and we'll share that with the public as we move forward. But I do want to thank everyone again for coming tonight to have this conversation about the middle school realignment that's going to be taking place next year. I may use the word reconfiguration and realignment throughout the presentation tonight. It really means the same thing. As a district, we are going to be changing up the configuration grade-wise of our two middle schools. McCarthy Middle School and Parker Middle School currently both serve students in grades 5 through 8 in the school system. And next year, we're going to be moving to have Parker Middle School service all students in the district in grades 5 and 6. And then at McCarthy Middle School, all students in the district in grades 7 and 8 will be at McCarthy Middle School. We're going to start by, again, kind of going through a little bit of the history and what brought us to this decision, and then talk again a little bit about the planning that's taken place so far and how that information is going to be shared moving forward. So let me start my presentation here tonight. For those who didn't have an opportunity to take a look at the work last year that we had put in place, again, this is a little bit of repetitive information, but I really do think it provides a good backdrop for why we're doing what we're doing. Back in the fall of 2016, the district had engaged the services of Doran Whittier Architects. They're an architectural firm that works with school systems around school building projects. And we had them come into the district, and we really had two goals in mind when working with Doran Whittier. One was to help us develop a short-term capital plan for the district to take into consideration projects that we fund on an annual basis with town funding. That's kind of internally within our town budget. We fund anywhere from $3 to $4 million per year of smaller capital projects within the schools and the other town departments. And then longer term, we also wanted to take a look at a potential new school building project with the within the town, but we would need to work in collaboration with the state on that because of the funding that's involved. So there's a group in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts School Building Authority who works with local school systems on school building projects. It could be a brand new school building project. It could be a renovation, an addition to a school building project. But most districts in the state do work with the MSBA because they provide funding for the project. The amount of funding the MSBA provides on a new school building project or like a major renovation project is really dependent on each community and their ability to pay. But just for to give you some ballpark idea, in Chelmsford, if we were to do a new school building project, our reimbursement rate would be approximately 50%, or about half of the project would be reimbursed through the state. So these days, if you're doing a high school, middle school, or elementary school project, in excess of $100 million, it would be a great opportunity for us to be able to receive half of that, or $50 million from the state, and the town to only have to contribute $50 million. So we had Durham Whittier come in 2016. They went through all of our school buildings, soup to nuts. They took a look at the interior parts of the building, the roofs, the doors, the windows, the floors, the cleanliness. They took a look at the systems within the buildings, HVAC, again, all of the different configurations within the schools. And they helped us put together a 10-year capital plan that we've been adhering to right along the way to really perform a lot of the smaller capital projects. Again, anywhere in the range of $3 to $4 million of projects a year. A couple examples of smaller projects that we've done on our own using town capital would be at the Parker Middle School. 2 summers ago, we refurbished the kitchen area at the school, and that came out really nice. This last year, we just finished a big overhaul of the auditorium space at the McCarthy Middle School. So those are examples of smaller projects that we've done through the town capital. And then obviously, if we went to a bigger project with the state, a new school building, something along those lines, that would be our longer term plan. One of the things back in 2016, when we were trying to figure out what we would actually be looking for a new school building project, we originally kind of honed in on applying for a new high school project for the town. At that time, when we took a look at all of the different variables in play, we said as a community, if we were going to try to build one new school in town, what one project could really have the biggest impact for us, but that could actually be felt K-12 throughout the whole school system. We were concerned as an administration and school committee that, and also with the town wouldn't be able to do multiple project after project after project if we were to do, say, a number of elementary schools, or we wanted to do 2 middle schools and then a high school. Just for the amount of money that the town would have to put up for the town's bonding capacity, we just didn't think it was realistic. So if we were going to move forward with one particular project, how could we do that and really maximize our finances, but also really get the best product in the end that we could? We know if we go forward with a new school building project at some point, and hopefully we're going to be doing that in the very near future, we need to have the support of town meeting, but we also then need to have the support of the community because it would require some type of a debt exclusion or debt override. So we also had to be very strategic in our thinking, because if you actually do look at our school facilities, some could argue that our elementary school facilities in some instances are the oldest and really could use a refresher for sake. But if you look at a town-wide initiative and trying to get town-wide support for a project where we have 4 different elementary schools, it could be very difficult to get financial support from the town if we were only actually providing a new school, which was going to benefit 25% of the town. Similarly, when we had the middle school project discussion at the time, we talked about if we were to do a new middle school, we couldn't have a new Parker or McCarthy and have the other school, Parker or McCarthy, not be done and really have a have and a have not situation develop within town. So we thought at the time, perhaps doing a new high school project would be the best avenue to go. We'd be able to have everyone in the town benefit from it. We'd be able to hopefully have town-wide support to move on that. And we ultimately decided to move forward and try to file an application with the MSBA. This was back in 2016, was our first application for a new high school project. The way the MSBA works with their annual basis, they receive money from the state budget to fund projects within school systems. So they fund elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Every year it's a different application process, and every year they do a review of the projects that come in, and based on need, they decide which schools they're actually going to fund. We found ourselves in a position where we applied for 4 or 5 years in a row for a new high school project, and we just weren't being competitive because our high school itself is actually in very good shape for its age. Our school was built and came online in the early 70s. It's approaching 50 years old. However, we were competing against high schools in the state that were well over 100 years old. High schools, as you can imagine, cost much more to build than a middle school or an elementary school. So historically, the MSBA has only funded a couple of high schools a year at most, 1, 2, maybe there was a year when they funded 3. But because they're so costly, typically there are not a lot of high school projects that do receive funding and move forward. So we have been applying unsuccessfully for that since 2016. We wanted to, at this point, kind of re-look at our process. Should we still be applying for a high school project? We think, again, it is a project that would benefit the whole town. We feel like we could get town support for that. But how long do we want to keep applying for a high school project if it's just not viable, given the age and condition of our school? So we decided to have Dorn Whittier come back in with us a year ago. So this was in the fall of 2021. We wanted them to first take a look at our short-term capital plan. Those are those $3 to $4 million capital projects that we do ourselves each year, to see if since 2016, when they helped put a plan together with us, if we've actually stayed in line and accomplished the different projects that we said we would. Did we prioritize? Did we maintain our priorities? Is there anything that we need to reshuffle? We also asked them, secondly, to take a look at that long-term capital plan and see if the high school should really still be the priority project as a community that we were pushing to try to work with the MSBA. And we engaged them also to have a discussion with us around what is the likelihood of eventually getting the high school project, how long could it take, should we actually shift and take a look at potentially a different school building project, keeping in mind we'd have to have full community support to be able to move that forward. So in that type of a situation, it would have to be a school that actually had a benefit to the entire town. So Dorn Whittier came in during the fall of 21 to actually take a look at that with us. At the same time, running a kind of a parallel route, we had a group called District Management Group, or DM Group, who had come into the district to help work with us a little bit on strategic planning. So that was not directly tied to the school facility portion of this. They were looking more at our district academics and programming and services that we offer in the schools, and that was running parallel to the DM group work. One of the things that came out of the work with Dorn Whittier, but ultimately it actually circled around when we were doing our strategic management work with District Management Group, was the possibility of shifting from a high school project to a middle school project being the kind of the driving force or the priority project within our MSBA application. One of the things that we, again, thought about is we don't want to ever have a situation where we have one new middle school in town and one is an older middle school in town, again, to kind of create that inequity and that have and have not situation. But we did talk to, again, Dorn Whittier and then District Management Group to kind of vet out what if we actually did shift to a middle school project being our priority project with the MSBA. Would we have a better chance of getting some traction with that particular project? If so, would we prioritize Parker or McCarthy to possibly be the school of focus? And what would our options be so that all students in town would actually benefit from a new middle school? So we went through a number of different iterations of what could actually come from this. You know, there was discussion about, you know, do we build one brand new mega middle school in town that would service 5 through 8 kids in grades 5 through 8 across the whole town in one school? If a school system did that, our middle school would be relatively equal size to the high school, which obviously is a large school. Most school systems that have a very large middle school like that would actually break it down and have kind of an upper and a lower school on the same physical location. They may have a side of the building be, say, for 5th and 6th grade. You'd have some common areas in the middle, like the caf and the gym that you might share. And then the other side of the building would be for 7th and 8th grade. So that was a possibility to be looked at. We also thought about possibly building a brand new middle school to incorporate 3 grade levels. So right now we have grades 5 to 8, but we know we actually have some student enrollment issues coming up through the elementary schools, and we could use some additional space in the future to help us at the elementary school level. As a district, our enrollment is relatively flat. However, we're seeing a decline in enrollment at the high school and an increase of enrollment at the elementary school. And within the next 3 to 4 years, that is going to converge on the middle schools. So we could use some additional space at that level. So another possibility might be if we submitted an application to the MSBA for a new middle school project in town, could we build a brand new, say, grade 4, 5, 6 school? What that would do is actually allow us to take the 4th grade out of the elementary school, free up some space at the elementary schools for the student enrollment. We'd have a brand new 4, 5, 6 school that all kids in town could go to and benefit from. And I think we'd have a better chance of getting community support for something like that. and then all of our town kids would go on to grades 7 and 8 at McCarthy, and then on to the high school. Another thing we could do is have a new grade 6, 7, 8 school, so that all kids, we could reallocate our grade levels 1 through 5 and have all kids be able to go to a new middle school, grade 6, 7, and 8. There were all different iterations of possibilities that we came up with that fortunately we don't have to decide at this point in time with the MSBA. They have you actually just apply for a concept, and we ultimately in April decided to switch from a high school priority project to a middle school project. We did, for the purposes of the application, identify Parker as the middle school that would come offline, and ultimately we would build a new school to replace Parker. But there still needs to be, when we get to that stage, community discussion around, would we potentially do a new kind of mega middle school for grades 5 to 8? Would we do a new middle school grades 4, 5, 6, a new middle school grades 6, 7, 8? There were all different ideas, but the MSBA, because they're actually paying for half of the school, would want to come in and work with our community to figure out what really is the best use of our money and their money to do that. Keeping in mind, when we did file this application back in April, even if we are invited into the MSBA pipeline, it's a long process. So we wouldn't actually be through the process and best case scenario, see a new school open up for 6 or 7 years. So we do have to keep that in mind as we're doing this work. As we were doing the work with Dora Whittier and also District Management Group, one of the things that both groups identified for us were just inefficiencies between McCarthy and Parker as they stand now. And both groups actually pointed to, as an interim measure, because again, we'd be waiting for 6 to 7 years for a new school under best case scenario. If we're currently operating McCarthy and Parker as identical type schools, both of them currently have what we call an 8-strand configuration. So they have 8 grade classrooms at each grade level in the building. So there are 8 classrooms of 5th grade, 8 classrooms of 6th, 8 classrooms of 7, 8 classrooms of 8 as far as your core classes in those 2 spaces. But again, there is inequity. There's a little bit of an imbalance student enrollment wise, programming wise. It's not quite the same between the 2. DM group, when we were actually taking a look at academics and scheduling, flagged for us, and it was something that we knew. We have scheduling issues in both buildings because our 5th and 6th grade grade levels are really running more of an elementary type schedule, where students have 2 teachers that they go to over the course of a day, and the times are slightly different than 7th and 8th grade, which is running more of a high school type schedule, where students actually are rotating around and seeing 4 academic core teachers during the day. So there were just a number of different inefficiencies with that particular model. And Dora Whittier on the facility side, looking at it with us, said you have the space to actually do this interim scenario now, where you could convert Parker to be a 5th and 6th grade school and McCarthy to be a 7th and 8th grade school, and actually work through some of these inequities and imbalances. At the same time, District Management Group was saying, we really think you should take a look at this because it would pose some benefits as far as schedule and students and alignment and whatnot. So we ended up last spring having a number of different parent sessions. Some were in person, some were online. We actually had staff sessions. We had a number of working groups get together with me of staff from both middle schools, and we went through a couple of exercises. One was called an I Wonder exercise. So it was really just kind of first thoughts on, if we were to do something like this, what do you wonder? What do you think would be good? What do you think would be questionable? What would we have to work through? We ultimately issued some surveys. We collected some feedback from, again, parents, actually students and staff. And we did kind of a plus minus exercise to figure out what potential benefits could come from this. What are some of the negatives that we would have to take into consideration? And I will kind of briefly go through those with you in a few moments. At the very end of the process, we received very good feedback and positive feedback in general from staff and students and parents that this actually really is worthwhile to consider and to possibly implement this interim model where we do this split and have Parker become a 5-6 and McCarthy become a 7 and 8. So after the staff meetings concluded and the parents meetings concluded, I ultimately did make a recommendation to the school committee that we move forward with this new model. The school committee considered it, took a look at all of the information, and ultimately voted in agreement and in support of that and to adopt this new middle school model. And we did assure people at the time that we wouldn't be doing it for the current school year, but that the 22-23 school year, the current one, would be a planning year, and then we would move to implement this new plan next fall, for the fall of 23. So that is what we're doing at this point in time, and what we're trying to do is organize and really best prepare for that realignment or reconfiguration of our middle schools. So very briefly, again, this PowerPoint presentation will be shared with all the participants that are here tonight. We can also email it out to the group because you've supplied your email addresses when you registered to attend the session tonight. So very quickly, I'll just kind of go through some of the I wonder exercises that came from the staff and the parents. The first one that a lot of people had questions about was, what exactly is the right size for a building? If we are going to build a new school building in town, this is more related to that. Would a mega middle school be the way to go? Is a 1,400 student middle school too much? Is it too unwieldy? What is the right size for a middle school population in town? There was a concern about, just having a 2 grade level configuration. So the 5, 6, 7th, and 8th model, it adds a different number of transitions for students. And we know transitions can be very difficult. We also had some parents on, some staff members on our board who are parents who in their own communities have a model where the kids go to elementary school through grade 4, and then they go to a middle school for 5, 6, they go to a different school for 7 and 8, and then they go off to the high school. And the feedback that we actually got from those staff was that it was really more of a parent perception issue than a student issue, having the extra transition. The kids, after the first year, there's certainly some shaking and imbalance that takes place. After that first year of implementation, that's just what the kids know, and the pros outweigh the cons in doing that. There was a question about, by combining these grade levels, would it be better for us special education populations? Would it produce better and equitable group assignments and different groupings? Are there some groups that this would benefit and some groups that it wouldn't benefit? So that was something that people thought about. A lot of our staff had questions about the teaming configuration that we have currently, and the fact that at the 5th and 6th grade level, we have the 2-teacher model, and then the 7th and 8th grade level model. Is that really the best model to maintain? Should we take a look at any kind of tweaks with that if we were to implement a new school reconfiguration of grades? And that is something that we're doing. A lot of people had questions about just some of the more practical aspects of school. How would different events that one school currently hosts be different than in a particular school? I know at McCarthy, there are different events that they have with students that Parker doesn't necessarily have, but then Parker has different events that McCarthy doesn't have. So how would that all take place? There are some very just practical issues around busing. We currently have 2 zones within the town for busing, and we have very strict zoning where buses from McCarthy students have to live in a particular neighborhood grouping. Same at Parker. How would that possibly be impacted within this? And then last was just a question about actually taking a look at other districts to see what they have, what is working well, what isn't working well, if they happen to have this particular grade level configuration. So to quickly go through some of the pluses that came out of the exercise that we had done with our staff and our students, and we received feedback from parents. On a positive, this type of a change that we're going to implement would be equitable for students. It would have all of our students in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 having the same middle school experience. The same level of programming. They would be exposed to their peer groups a little bit earlier, coming out of elementary school into middle school, but they'd be able to go as peer groups through 5 and 6 at Parker, and then go up together to 7, 8 at McCarthy, and then off to the high school. We do, as we're starting to look into this with staff, we do have some differences in programming between the 2 schools. This would be a way to really kind of bring it together and have there be equitable programming between the 2 buildings. The other thing that we do currently have is some inequity with class sizes in the schools. And this does fluctuate a little bit year to year based on the students, because we, again, have 2 distinct neighborhood zones that feed the 2 buildings. This year, class sizes are actually higher at McCarthy than they are at Parker. But again, if you didn't reconfigure this whole situation or rezone the district, which is not something we're looking to do, it does just have inequitable class sizes. So this is something that would actually take care of that, because if we had all 5 and 6, 7, and 8 kids in the same building, equitable class sizes would be on day one realized across the district. We have an elementary feeder school pattern that, unless you actually are at Byam or Harrington, you may not know. But there are a pocket of students at Byam and Harrington that actually feed the McCarthy Middle School currently, based on our geography, as opposed to the Parker. And it's very difficult, in my opinion, for those students who grades K through 4 are currently going through elementary school with a cohort of students, and then it's approximately 10% of them that end up, just because of where they live, going over to feed to McCarthy Middle School instead of remaining with their cohort to go to Parker. And again, it just has to do with the townwide distribution of students, the class sizes, the having to do some reshuffling over the years. But this would actually address that right out of the gate, where after 4th grade, all of our students would move from elementary school to, again, Parker Middle School for 5, 6, and then off to McCarthy for 7 and 8. It would eliminate that, that inequity that happens at those two elementary schools. We also have, as far as eliminating moves within the district, we actually do have a good number of students on a monthly basis based on if they move within town, if they move into town, move out of town, that actually have to transfer between middle schools, because again, it's by neighborhood. If you happen to live in the McCarthy district in a particular month and your family moves to another area of town, and you would have to go to Parker Middle School. Now, we allow students the first year that that move takes place to actually petition to be able to remain at the school that they were in to close out that year before they have to move on to the next one. And some parents do avail themselves of that, but under our current transportation system, because we're only providing transportation within neighborhood zones, the parents have to voluntarily agree to transport their students to the other school where the bus isn't going. So if you're at McCarthy and you move to a Parker district, if the parent volunteers to drive from the Parker district over to McCarthy, it's okay for that year. But that is an inequity, and it's not equitable when you have some parents who have the means and methods to be able to do that, and others within the district that don't. And even if you're not a family that happens to move, your child is still impacted by other children in the district moving within and out of classes. It definitely does impact the classroom setting and the classroom culture and norms that are taking place. So this would actually address that, because regardless of where you lived as a 5th grader in the district, you would be going to McCarthy. Even if you moved to another neighborhood in town, you would stay in that particular school. One thing that we heard a lot from parents was that this actually creates a much more developmentally in line, just age appropriateness for students. There is a big difference when you're walking in a middle school and you see 5th grade students compared to just much more mature 8th grade boys and girls when they're getting to go to high school. So by having all 5th and 6th grade kids in one school and then all 7th and 8th grade kids in another, just on its own, by making this moves, it actually has a more developmentally appropriate balancing of students. This also helps our special education, L staffing, and even some of our specialists, because right now in a middle school, they may have to be actually servicing kids in grades 5 through 8. It can be hard to prepare. Licensing is not a huge issue because most of those specialists do have a license that expands for grades 5 to 8. But when you're doing work with students and you're doing your prep and your planning, it is much more difficult to plan for a 4-grade level span of students as opposed to 2. So that was another thing that the staff actually mentioned when they were taking a look at this. I mentioned earlier, another plus was that this actually could produce much more consistent student and teacher schedules to maximize time on learning. Again, where we have the schools operating a separate 5th and 6th grade schedule and a separate 7th and 8th grade schedule within the same building, it just creates inefficiency because the times don't align properly for access to specialists and special education staff and L staff and different supports, tutors and interventionists and whatnot that the schools have. So if we had a whole building on the same schedule, it just allows for greater flexibility to maximize student teaching time and student schedules. Another plus for our teachers is that they would have closer contact with their counterparts. So just as an example, at the middle school level, 7th and 8th grade, we have core content teachers. So in 7th grade, you might have at the McCarthy, you have 2 teachers who are your science teachers, and you have 2 teachers who are math teachers. Well, if they're now actually in the same building, you have another 2 colleagues to be working with and supporting and sharing ideas with. It makes it a little bit easier to do that. It makes it easier for, if we're doing professional development or any kind of staff support as a district, to be able to have teams of supports work with particular grade levels and content specialists within one building. And again, as hard as it is now with our 2 schools having a different schedule for 5, 6, and 7, 8, both schools have different schedules on their own for grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there's just not efficient time within the day to ever get staff together to be able to support one another, to be collegial and work with one another and receive any kind of supports of professional development. So this would actually allow for that. Just as an aside, obviously it would make it easier for sharing materials and resources and supplies among staff. We have a number of staff that actually have to travel back and forth between the schools because they service students at Parker and they service students at McCarthy. Again, this would create much less traveling teachers that would be required. And as I mentioned earlier, we had the issue with the specialists where they could really just focus on servicing 2 groups of students as opposed to 4. Some of the minuses or some of the concerns that we had talked about, and we will be talking about, obviously, is this does create an additional transition for students. And I think most of us would like to see students be in a school for at least 3 years to be able to get a sense of their classmates and staff and different cultures and whatnot within the buildings. It does create that, so that is something that we're going to have to be very mindful of. Climate and culture is significant, and there is a different feel in every single school that you walk into, not only in Chelmsford, but around the state and the country. And every school kind of has their own way of doing things, their own response to different situations. So we are going to have to make sure as we do this, we take into consideration the climate and the culture for staff and for students as we're merging these populations. Financially, it was raised as a question, are we doing this for financial reasons? And I want to be very clear about this. We are absolutely not. Finances was the last thing that came into the discussion process when we were doing this. We really were focusing on what would be best for students and supporting staff to have the very best educational opportunity that they can. The very best programming, service delivery, that is what went into this equation. Ironically, this model actually may cost us more because we are going to be replicating and duplicating programs in 2 buildings. It may, as we're going through this process now, we're analyzing schedules, we may need to add some staff here and there to be able to fully support the students in the schools. So this was not done at all as a cost savings measure. And again, I think in the end, it may actually cost us a little bit more, but the pros just certainly outweighed the cons in doing so. And I think in the end, we're going to have a better educational product by doing this. There were obviously then, because this was a staff working group on this particular one, but there was a concern about, how would grade level teams be reorganized? Would we keep the 5, 6, 7, 8 grade structure that we have? And yes, for this point in time, we're not looking to change up that whole model. So students we're still anticipating will have, 2 teachers for 5th and 6th grade, and then they'll transition to a full team of teachers for 7th and 8th grade when teachers become a little bit more divided by content. That is nothing that we're looking to kind of shake up or change at this point in time. And actually, as we do this realignment, a lot of the work is going into on the staff level now, kind of figuring out who is going to shift and go with what buildings. One of the things that we want to be very mindful of when we're doing this is going to be a transition. That particularly the first year or 2, we need to support the staff and students who are making these shifts. We have students at McCarthy Middle School who are currently 5th graders who really with their teachers are going to be shifting over to Parker School for 6th grade, and then they're going to have to come back for 7th and 8th grade at McCarthy. So there is going to be kind of a double shift for that one particular group of students. We also have students who have been at Parker Middle School for 3 years and who for their 8th grade year are going to shift over to McCarthy. We're going to want to be conscious and cognizant of that. I think on a plus, the pluses really did outweigh the minuses in this particular exercise. And I think the other thing that we're hearing loud and clear from parents that we've talked to and also staff is we anticipate the vast majority of staff in these 2 buildings will be moving with their kids to the new spaces. And the kids, a lot of the kids really actually know each other outside of school from sports and different clubs and activities that they do in town. So this really actually will be a beneficial way of kind of getting them together earlier in their careers. And we're going to make every effort possible to really support them as we make this shift. So a little bit of an update for you with regard to, how we're going about this move, when you can anticipate additional information coming. And what I want you to, kind of leave here tonight knowing is if you're hearing from this, again, is internally, last year we had some working groups that worked with me and they were staff driven. We had staff members from every grade level and specialty area at Parker McCarthy come together and have these initial discussions. we have put these, what we're now calling, instead of working groups, we're calling them transition teams together. We had a first meeting last month. We're going to be meeting regularly to kind of go through some of the logistics with this particular move. One of the things that we're in the process of doing now is kind of building layouts and maps to figure out how Parker is going to become a grade 5 and 6 district-wide school, how McCarthy is going to become a district-wide 7 and 8 school. Again, we know the spaces are there because we currently have the same number of core instructional areas in the buildings. We just need to figure out how they're going to properly align. We're in the process of doing that. We want to make sure that our programming and service delivery is comparable at both schools. We're identifying areas where McCarthy may offer a particular program of service that Parker doesn't. Vice versa, Parker may have a service or program that they offer their current students that McCarthy doesn't. So we're in the process of working all of that out so that we have consistent programming, grades 5 to 8 at both schools. We have a number, just as an aside, we have a number of specialty programs at the different buildings, largely due to special education or ELL. So a lot of our programs might have currently, say, 2 classrooms, and one classroom might be serving a 5-6 population. It can be blended. One might be having a 7th and 8th grade population. Obviously, those are going to be a little bit easier to split because we could have the 5th and 6th grade classroom or program move or stay at Parker, and the 7th and 8th grade move or stay at McCarthy. But there are other circumstances in the district where we might have just a program that's currently serving grades 5 to 8. In those cases, we're looking to make sure that we're replicating that program and that the program of services is going to be tailored to grades 5 and 6 at Parker, and we're going to need to either add or alter a program at McCarthy to also provide the same level of programming services for grades 7 and 8 kids at those schools. So that's something that's in the process now. One thing that we did hear a lot about is student transportation and how is that going to work. So I've heard a couple of different scenarios, and I want to just give you my initial thoughts as we're trying to finalize how this will work. Originally, we heard, or I had some requests saying, you know, maybe this is a good time to actually have there be separate busing for students in grades 5 and 6 from students in grades 7 and 8. Currently, everyone is driving together now. I've also had other parents talk to me and say, you know what, we appreciate and we understand why you'd be doing this grade level reconfiguration, but it's really just going to be too difficult for me to have 2 different start and stop times for the bus stop and things like that for the kids. Could they still at least ride the buses together? At this point in time, we're working with our transportation coordinator. We're rerunning routes and we're putting different scenarios together. It does not look like it's going to be feasible to run 2 district-wide pickup and drop-offs for grades 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 separate and get the students to school safely and timely. What is more likely to happen is that we will maintain all students in grades 5 to 8 like we currently have on the same buses. That there'll be the bus pickups and start and stop times will be the same. So if you have a child in 5th grade and a child in 7th grade, they'll be at the bus stop together in the morning, getting on the bus and getting off in the afternoon together. But the bus will do a town-wide loop to pick up students from your neighborhood. We will likely go to, I'm going to imagine, Parker first and drop off the 5th and 6th grade students. And then the bus will go over to McCarthy and drop off the 7th and 8th grade students. And then they'll go on their way to do the elementary runs. What it will mean is at the end of the day, the bus will go to Parker first and pick up the 5th and 6th grade students. And then they'll go over to McCarthy and pick up the 7th and 8th grade students and then go do their drop-offs. We'll probably have to stagger the school start times one way or the other by approximately 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, but it won't be significant. We're not looking at, you know, half an hour, or anything like that, but enough time to be able to do 2 different drops, to be able to do a drop at Parker and then go do a drop at McCarthy and vice versa. I'll know much more probably around the holidays when we break and come back in January with regard to if that is the way we're going to go with transportation. But I know that's a hot topic and we received a lot of questions about that. And I'm really leaning in that direction just based on the data that we have so far. I think that is going to be the most doable scenario for us so that we can, again, maintain safe and efficient and timely routes. It is not looking like it could be possibly done the other way. I think that is a benefit as a parent because, again, you'll only have one pickup and drop off time and one pickup and drop off location. And oftentimes the older sibling, if you do happen to have them, a 7th or 8th grader, may be looking over a 5th or 6th grade sibling. So they will still be able to ride the bus together and home in the afternoon. So that's something that we're working on, but we have heard a lot about that. The other real focus of our time right now is working with our staff around the transfer process. A lot of it is laid out in the contract, a lot of it is not. We actually have a very good working relationship with our teachers union and our other support unions on trying to figure out what's going to be best for our staff members, how they can best acclimate to the new school, the new position that they're going to be going into. Again, in the end, for comfort purposes, I really do think that the vast majority of our staff are going to be transferring with their kids over to the new school location. So that is going to, I hope, be comforting to both staff, students, and parents. We have a group that's doing a deeper dive into student schedules, staff schedules, the desired programming that we either have or we might like to see. Students are actually going to be surveyed and be giving some input into what they currently have for programming. Are there any ideas they have? Because this is really a time to be able to take a look at that. But the student schedule and staff schedule is going to take quite some time to work through. That'll actually be happening all winter and springtime. And then lastly, we asked our staff to start talking about different transition activities. Are there ways, once we get a little bit more finality around some of these logistical issues, how can we arrange for some student staff gatherings? Are there going to be opportunities this spring for our 5th and 6th grade students at McCarthy to meet up and do an activity with the 5th and 6th grade students and staff at Parker? Vice versa, our 7th grade students at Parker, to get them over to McCarthy to do a little bit of work with their current teachers and the teachers over at McCarthy in the 7th and 8th grade, so that they're familiar with them, so that they actually kind of know the facilities. We do have a number of different ideas that are in the works that will be laid out after the holidays for opportunities for those groups to get together. Second opportunity are these parent information sessions. So tonight, again, was really kind of an overview of how we got to the decision that we've made. We have made the decision. This is something that we are moving forward with and we're implementing next fall. I do plan to have a number of sessions after the new year with more information like this. Again, if we have hundreds of people who are at least listening in or want this information, it's very difficult to do kind of a Q&A remotely over the computer like this. In the winter and the spring, we haven't just had a great an outpouring of people to come to the in-person events, but I will offer in-person events if people would like to come out and listen and ask some questions. In the meantime, I did commit to, on a monthly basis, offering what we're going to call virtual office hours. So it'll be similar to this. We're actually going to advertise and post a link. The office hours are going to change by month, but the first set is actually going to be next Wednesday. So in the newsletter on Friday, and then I'll also put an email out with these times. I'm going to have just like an hour or so of time. I'm going to block off virtually. You'll have a link. That'll be more of a Q&A. So if you want to actually just come in and have a conversation with me, there's no presentation. It's really just me being available by computer if you want to come in and ask a question, or if you have a particular issue you'd like me to look into or concern you'd like us to take into consideration as we're doing this realignment, that'll be a great time to do that. Again, I certainly will provide some opportunity for in-person sessions as we get into the new year, and I have more specifics about how this is going to all roll out. But each month, the virtual office hours will be again advertised, and they're going to move. It just happens to be this first month on my schedule, I was free at 10 and I was free at 3. In January, I know the times are a little bit different. We'll add some hours in the evening as well for people to be able to come and ask their questions if they have them. These particular office hours will be dedicated to the middle school realignment reconfiguration. If people have other questions or concerns about other non-realignment issues with the middle school, you can always call, set up a different time to talk to me, but we're definitely going to try to keep these to be issue-based and around this particular matter. So looking forward, a couple of things again we're going to ask for tonight. Just begin, I think this would be the easiest way to collect information to get any questions or concerns you may have about this realignment that's going forward for next fall. There is a link to this Google form online. If you look at your chat box on the side of the screen, there's also a link to the Google form in that. If you click on the Google form, I'm just asking for your email address, your first and your last name, so that I can help kind of track these questions and concerns. Again, these are any questions you may have just in general about the middle school realignment, or a concern I just framed as we're have our working groups together and our transition teams meeting to look at all these different issues. Are there things you want me to keep in mind with that group as we're doing this work? So that would be a concern you'd want us to keep in the loop. When you produce all of those questions and concerns you want us to look at, I'll work internally with our transition teams on generating a frequently asked questions or an FAQ document that will respond to the majority of these questions that come up that are repetitive and I think everyone's going to want an answer to. Obviously, not one-off type questions about a particular child or case. Those will just be handed on an individual basis. But the general questions and concerns you may have, you want us to look into. We're going to put that FAQ together. We're going to put that on the website. I'll add it to our newsletters going forward, and that'll be a document that we continually update as we go through this process. Again, because you did register for this session and you provided your email address and your name, when we have these documents completed, we'll also email them out to the group so that everyone in the group actually receives them. And then again, as follow-up in the winter and the spring months, I will advertise well in advance additional parent information sessions, virtual as well as in person, so that you can come get the latest information on the rollout, ask questions, again, flag any concerns you want us to try to address as best we possibly can. And we'll try to keep the flow of information as current as we can, as factual. I know there will be a lot of rumors around different scenarios or why we're doing different things or how it's being done. So we'll try to provide in as timely a fashion as we possibly can real answers to your questions by adding them to the FAQ document, making sure that that's updated, posted to our website, included in our newsletters. And as we actually make final decisions about this implementation for the fall, you have that information so that you can plan accordingly with your students and staff and families. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Again, in closing, you can access this Google form to ask questions and concerns right from this website. You will be receiving an email likely tomorrow with a link to the recorded video. You'll have a link to the Google form in case you don't access it through the chat or on this particular screen, so that you can fill that out. It'll remain open. I'm not going to close the form, so if you decide to have a question, over the weekend, you can go and add that question. If you have another question that pops up in 2 weeks, it'll still be open, and I allowed it to accept multiple questions from the same people. So you can just go fill out another form with another question, and we'll try to see if we can't answer that for you. And as soon as we have that assembled and we're able to have our working teams take a look at it, again, we'll share that through the newsletter. We'll post that to the website. And again, because you've registered for this, you'll actually receive a personal email with that as well. In addition to the Google Doc link that you're going to receive, you will receive a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So the link is embedded within that, and any of the information that I've talked about tonight is there as well. So that concludes the session tonight. I just wanted again to take that opportunity to provide you with this latest information that we had, to give a little bit of that overview for you with regard to this middle school realignment that's going to be taking place next year. This again is going to be starting in September of 23. All 5th and 6th grade students in the district will be at Parker. All 7th and 8th grade students in the district will be at McCarthy. And we're going to make sure as we do this transition, we do it right, that we provide you information along the way. I'm very aware that this transitions are difficult for staff, students, and families. We're going to be spending special attention to try to make this as seamless as possible, to make sure that, again, the information is shared as quickly and timely and accurately as we can, that we have the proper supports in place to really make sure that our staff and students feel comfortable, they feel welcomed in this transition. I'm open to hearing your feedback and any, again, questions, concerns, things you want me to keep in mind as we're doing this work. But we've got a lot of people in this district who are putting a lot of time into doing this. And I really do think we wouldn't be doing it otherwise, that in the end, this is going to produce a better product for us at the middle school, both programming-wise, servicing-wise. And I think it's really going to, in the end, make the Chelmsford schools a better middle school experience for our kids. So I thank you for coming tonight. Again, we'll get this video posted to the website. Thank you for your time. Good night.